Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the Analytic Mind podcast. Today, I'm with Jamie Beason. Now, Jamie has a really interesting background in data and analytics, and certainly I know has some good stories to unpack around specific initiatives around data and analytics within some of the organizations that she's worked in. So, why don't we just jump straight into it, Jamie? Why don't you just give us a little bit of an intro, a little bit of a background around, maybe where you worked recently, and some of the interesting things that you have been doing, and maybe where you're based as well, so the listeners know that too. And then we can just dive into some really interesting things that we just chatted about before we push record here. That I know will be really valuable to everyone tuning in.
All right, sounds good. Can do. Thanks, Sam. So my name is Jamie Beason. My background has been, until very recently, exclusively in supply chain, in the industrial industry. So I had some time at GE Plastics, which was then purchased by Sabic. The last 4 years, I was at Ingersoll Rand. Today, I'm at JLL. So at JLL, we're a technology company specializing in corporate real estate, and that is something that I am learning. So I think probably most of what I talk through today will be through the lens of Ingersoll Rand and just my view on things. So I think maybe the most interesting part of my career was the last 4 years when I was at Ingersoll Rand. So each role I've had an interest in analytics, mainly just to keep my sanity and automate my way through my jobs. When I joined Ingersoll Rand, I came on as an inventory manager, and I was leading a team of 4, so it was me plus 3. And what was interesting about that is that we were responsible for inventory control and speaking to why we had too much or not enough inventory. But what we didn't own was the actual purchasing function. So the way the org was set, there was a purchasing team that would transact and work with vendors. And then my group owned deciding what to stock, what were the reorder triggers, all of the guts and gore of that. In a nutshell, we did not like our jobs. And that's because we were constantly answering, why do you have too much or why do you not have enough of item XYZ? Now, we were sitting at the distribution center, which was Ingersoll Rand's largest DC in North America, highly complex, supporting 4 different business units. Roughly 500 million in revenue per year, over 60,000 active SKUs, 60 million in inventory, very complex, different stocking methods, you name it. So it didn't take the team long to see this pattern that we were answering the same question over and over. So long story short, we brought in Alteryx to automate our way through it. It went so well, we ended up being promoted as a 4-pack, and then became the analytics and productivity team supporting the full DC. And that's where things really got interesting. So we brought Tableau on from there, ended up winning an internal award called a President's Award in Growth and Innovation, which is a big deal in our circle. So that was fun. And here today, I'm the Senior Director for BI and Analytics at JLL over one of their larger accounts. So it's been quite the journey in this career to keep leaning on analytics and process improvement and just see where it takes us.
Awesome. Well, there's plenty that we can jump into there, and I'm excited to get into more of the detail around, if we can, what you did around the inventory piece, more from a sort of like a high level. Just before we dive into to that, do you want to give a bit of just a little overview of what Ingersoll Rand does? Because they're from, I think, like a large conglomerate, is that right? But not everyone's obviously, from the US and things like that. So not everyone knows all of these huge conglomerates that you sort of never really hear about because they've all got different, pieces to their puzzle.
Yeah, absolutely. So Ingersoll Rand is a massive company, and they're behind the scenes. So you might not see them at the store when you're buying a power tool, but they're being used at factories. So Ingersoll Rand produces lots of hoists, winches, pumps, tools, compressors, a lot. I think they probably tap maybe every industry out there. They recently merged with Gardner Denver, so now they're even more of a powerhouse.
Wow.
I'm trying to think what industry they're not in. They're in automotive, they're in manufacturing, they're in
Hmm. And they're global. They're
all of it.
they've got
They're
global
global.
distribution, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we're
Correct.
talking billions and billions of revenue here,
Mm-hmm.
right? Cool. No, that's good. I mean, that just gives you a bit of an outline, bit of a scope of what you were probably having to deal with. You know, the numbers are probably enormous, and initially probably overwhelming, but it seems like you were, you know, by what you implemented as a solution in your specific area, it sounds like you made some really solid inroads. So, so tell me a little bit about when you first arrived in that sort of role, because I think this is going to be quite common and quite interesting, right? So you go into a role, and historically, not much is being done from a data and analytics perspective. You know, there could be a few reasons for that. Maybe it's the tool set didn't exist because, you know, as you probably know, the tools have really improved over recent years. So, you know, a lot of companies were stuck in Excel, or they're just stuck with historic tools that didn't deliver what they needed. So, you know, you maybe found yourself in that position. So it'd be good to talk about that. But then how you assessed as a team or as an individual, you know, what needed to be done, and then how you sort of went about it.
Good question. So I think a few things were happening in tandem. One, I had asked my team to give me one goal. So I wanted them to work together and assign me personally one goal that I was responsible for in that year. And when they did that, they said automation. They said, we were already using a lot of stored procedures and macros and all Excel-based type of automation, but they wanted to level it up. Also in tandem, Ingersoll Rand was hosting an analytics summit, which was what it sounds like. It was internal, and it was anybody in the BI space or interested in the BI space or have people in their ether that are in the BI space are welcome to come. And it's a few days event, and it's all internally curated. We did have some vendors come out, but a lot of the presenters are Ingersoll Rand employees. And I was aware of Alteryx before this, but I had never used it because it wasn't in my previous roles. But at the summit, I could tell that this was the internal tool for ETL. And I was like, that's perfect. That's what we need. So there I had my goal and I had my solution, but I didn't have my resources. So it took some asking around, and I was able to secure a trial license that was a little bit longer than the standard. I think at that time, Alteryx was offering 90-day trials for Ingersoll, and we got one that was 4 or 5 months. It was a little bit longer, which was really important because I think once you get a free trial, it takes you about a month to open the thing because your calendar is slammed, and then it takes you another month to go learn how to even click around a little bit, and then 3 months minimum before you're even close to the word dangerous. So, but my team knew that deadline was coming. We had a burning platform, so all 4 of us were equally as jazzed about having this new solution. So what we did was we call them learning lock-ins, and we would reserve a conference room for a full day. We'd surface for resources like air and food, but we pretty much just bunkered down, used a whiteboard and said, before we even opened Alteryx, just said, what are we trying to solve for? And so we mapped it out and we said, okay, what data sources do we need? These are our inputs. What joins do we have? Where do we need to blend our information? Where do we have gaps? Where do we need a subject matter expert? Well, we don't have one. And then from there, it turned into this like, I've heard some people call them war rooms. That sounds really aggressive, but just like this workshop where we're all busy bees. So we'd have somebody chasing down data and so on and so forth. So we ended up building our first workflow that so when somebody asks you, why do you have too much of item ABC? Traditionally in our world, there's about 7 questions that you ask, and there's generally an order to them. And for one human to step through all that, it's about an hour to be thorough. Our workflow walked every single SKU. So we had 60,000 active parts and infinitely more non-stocked or inactive and all that kind of stuff, 60,000 stocked parts. The workflow looked at every SKU in the building, said, why do you have too much? And then Paretoed it out. So it parsed it into buckets. So if you have 100 units too many, the workflow would tell you 20 of those units are because the forecast hasn't yet been achieved. 50 of those units are because you have a minimum purchase requirement, whatever. It would do that to every SKU in less than 2 minutes, which in the world of Alteryx is really slow. So we even optimized it later downstream, but that was what we did. So we could put these pages together for leadership, which I used the next couple of years in that role, was saying, you want to know why we have too much? We need to solve our minimum purchase issue, or our forecast is blah, blah, blah. So because that workflow was so successful, that was how we got our Alteryx licenses officially sponsored. And then we kind of just took off running from that.
Yeah. Well, there's some really good takeaways here from what you've just described there, which I like, and I want to I think it's worth just sort of repeating them. The first thing I liked was how the organization as a whole had a summit. You had an internal summit to build engagement, and I think that is a super idea. So if you haven't, it's about sort of penciling in an event or a time or a day in people's calendars, or maybe even a couple of days in people's calendars to really drive initiatives in the data and analytics space. Maybe for a lot of large organizations where everyone's got their day jobs and they've got a lot going on, it's sometimes just too hard to get build this sort of wave internally of everyone engaged, like being super engaged in building out your data culture, building out your data initiatives, and putting a sort of a stake in the ground and saying, okay, we're going to have we're going to have an event, and then maybe a competition off the back of that is a really solid way, I think, to build that buzz across a wide array of different business functions and business lines, etc. So I think that is a super idea. And do you think that played a big role in spurring a lot of the ideas and initiatives that went on post that point?
Yeah, what I'm about to say is going to sound very extreme, but I think that summit changed my life. I really do. Because
right, you personally,
yeah. Before that summit, so the theme, there were a couple of them, so a couple of years where they did the summit. The theme that year was all around getting people to acknowledge the term citizen data scientist, which was a new term for me. So on paper, my background's not in BI and analytics. On paper, I'm a finance and supply chain person. But my heart and soul always went out to analytics. And so that summit gave me the right, I could now articulate where my passions lie. I was now given the license to go and achieve these big BI dreams and goals without having a degree in mathematics or computing. So not only did it kind of light that fire and give me a green light to go chase it, but it told me what tools people were using. So I felt weaponized when I left, because I was like, oh, there's a playbook in my head now for what success looks like. So I got those things. I also achieved a lot of really strong relationships from that. Several people became my mentors over time that helped guide my future decisions. Like, I feel like that summit was where everything sort of started to click into place and cascade from there. It was a big deal.
Yeah. No, I just love these small little nuggets that come out of these discussions, because it's not just, if you want to really make a difference with the analytics initiatives within an organization, it's not just about the tools, it's not just about the resources, it's about these other small things that you can do as an organization that can really that can really get things rolling. Can really start getting this the impact happening across a wide array, the buy-in happening, and I think that's how you get these sort of exponential returns in building out your culture around data, your culture around analytics. So I love that idea. I really think that is a truly powerful one. That's a lot of listeners will hopefully get some good ideas for themselves. Their own organizations, big or small, right? It's about we know, hopefully most listeners realize the impact you can get these days out of implementing a lot of the ideas and tool sets and strategies. So it's just about forming something to sort of kickstart it, or that's a way to certainly do that. I also like the learning lock-in idea as well, where again, you set time aside to prioritize what you're doing, because everyone has their day job, everyone has meetings going on, and it's just like when you set aside a training event. If you're going to get some training on something, with your analytics initiatives, you should also set aside 1 or 2 days where everyone sits in a room and just powers through a workflow, powers through how to set up a dashboard. Having everyone in the room, getting everyone's expertise together, I'm sure was truly valuable in that situation.
Mm-hmm. And there's several schools of thought that all point to that being powerful. So Agile does something similar. Lean does something similar. They have rapid improvement, Kaizen events. Like it's very powerful when you're able to dedicate your focus to something for more than 5 minutes, especially in a collaborative space. Yeah, it was a game changer.
And I think the other thing that's interesting to note is that I can see some people thinking, taking 2 days off my day job is just going to be too difficult. But the thing is, especially with some of the latest tools like Alteryx and Tableau and Power BI and ClickView and all of these great tools, you can automate so much of what you are probably doing as your day job historically. I mean, running Excel spreadsheets, creating macros. I mean, you can literally automate so much of that. So if you just take 2 days of your time, you're probably saving maybe 20 of the next year, because of what you've been able to automate. And I think you were mentioning earlier that you were able to take a 4-person job down to half a day for one person or something like that, just by this one initiative.
Yeah, it's true. The inventory control automation that we put in place was more than just that one workflow. We ended up automating a lot of our department. So we took 4 people's worth of full-time work, parsed it down to something close to half a person, shifted that work back into the purchasing team. And that's where we were promoted as a 4-pack to go support analytics for the full DC.
Wow. And so you didn't, no one was worried that they were automating themselves out of a job here. It actually worked out really well for you guys. You're able to take a process, which was, you're probably doing a lot of manual stuff, allocate it somewhere else, and then you're able to go off and do something else interesting.
I was fortunate to have the right people on the team that had the mindset where automation is good, where if we automate our way out of this job, then we just do this new thing. So in the world of lean, there's 7 types of waste, and lately they added an 8th. It's my favorite, and it's talent. So they're formally saying that talent can also be wasted. So if you have somebody with a passion for ETL or a passion for data architecture, engineering, or mathematics, whatever that is, and you've got them acting as a report junkie, refreshing Excel or chasing or whatever it is, you are wasting that resource. So I was fortunate that I had a team that had a skill set that we were not tapping into. So we were happy to automate our way out of that so that we could go do what we really wanted to do and add new ways of value for the company. And that's where the innovation award came in, because we had the license to innovate, and we did.
Yeah. Well, I have mentioned this on a couple of earlier podcasts. Once you, and it'd be interesting to hear your take on this. Once you actually dive into the automation and you dive into the analytics that you can achieve, you almost start to see this blue ocean of other opportunities, other optimizations that you can make in so many different areas. It's just almost endless what you can achieve once you actually know what's possible.
Agreed. And to echo on pausing to learn or develop, I mean, in this particular career set, this probably applies to a lot of other careers, but I can speak to this one in particular. If we don't keep learning, we expire. The pace of change is so great that if we don't force ourselves to do learning lock-ins or go to training or read that blog or whatever it is, listen to that podcast, then we expire.
Yeah, no, things are changing so fast these days, aren't they? I mean, if you just look at the landscape, maybe 5-6 years ago, I mean, a lot of the stuff didn't really exist, did it? Or it was just sort of emerging, very, very initial stages. but now it's the acceleration. It really feels like the acceleration is huge. A lot more players, a lot more functionality. So yeah, I couldn't agree more, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Would it what I think would be next good to just elaborate on a little bit is Alteryx. I want to know a little bit more about what you were able to do with Alteryx at a high level. You know, what are the automations that you could do with this tool, and what it was able to do better than what had been done historically.
So I think there's a lot of strengths of Alteryx. One of them is the server. So once you create a workflow, you can automate it on the server. So it can run at whatever cadence you set. It can send off emails, files, what have you. Beyond that, you can also make apps. So you can push something to a web page, someone clicks a button and runs a procedure. Even within the ETL space of Alteryx, they've done a really nice job of having a drag and drop interface. So for people like me that can kind of read SQL and maybe get like in trouble with it, but aren't true coders, it's democratized. Is that the word? Democratized the
that's the buzzword.
The ETL.
I love that.
Yeah, right, exactly. It's very trendy right now.
Yeah.
It's made it so that people like me that can think that way but can't code can still just be as lethal as other folks. So I don't know what Alteryx can't do. I've seen people monetize their workflows. Like, it's crazy. You can a million different types of inputs, and then their blending options are great. You can even pull in geospatial things. You can do regex equations. You can, that's the other thing people like, is if you are a coder, you can still code in there. You don't have to do the drag and drop GUI. It also has some reporting features. I mean, it's great. I'm not as fluent in Power BI, but I did do a one-day workshop to just do like a crash course so I can know what's out there. And based on the flash that I saw, at least, Alteryx is much more in depth when it comes to ETL. And like I said, server lets you automate as well.
Yeah, obviously my expertise is sort of more in the Power BI. That's what we focus on with Enterprise DNA. But Alteryx has been around for a little bit longer than, well, actually Power BI has been around for a long time, but not in its latest version. But Alteryx is, from my understanding, this immensely powerful drag and drop ETL tool where you can bring huge amount, any sort of data source sets from a range of different data sources, all together, mash it up, run some evaluations and calculations and logic, and then spit out a refined data set, optimized data set, do potentially some machine learning algorithms or custom functions on the data, and then you can then do something. You can spit out some reports or alerts or whatever off the back end. Is that kind of right?
Yep, exactly. Yeah, I didn't even mention that. There's definitely some predictive and prescriptive options in there as well for modeling.
Yeah. Power BI does have an equivalent in terms of what they call the Power Query Editor, and this is actually a really powerful application that sits in behind Power BI. It's actually quite hidden. It's like the hidden gem of Power BI. And it can do a lot of that. It can do a lot of it, maybe not all, but there's probably a bit of overlap. But it is something, for those Power BI listeners out there, the query editor has got a lot of functionality as well that I think, maybe it doesn't have, is not as focused on ETL as probably Alteryx is, but it does have a lot of the functionality there. Because I presume when you use Alteryx, you also use like Tableau as the visualization tool. Is that generally how it works?
So the way I say it is that Alteryx is the kitchen you cook the food in, and Tableau is the plate you serve it on. But you don't have to have both, but they really are like peanut butter and jelly. So if your end goal is a spreadsheet or a new database, is probably a better answer, then you could probably stop at Alteryx. But if you're trying to stand up a visual dashboard or something that your audience can digest and you want to story tell with it and you really want to make it stick and you're trying to walk somebody through this journey, Tableau is the way to go from what we've seen. And they pair well together, so their inputs and outputs go well. Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah. Either way, I'll say Power BI included, all three, from what I've seen, have really strong communities that help you learn these tools, and the tools are designed to have short learning curves. So you can go from never heard of it to, hey, I built this thing in one day. Like it's really impressive. And then you can go as advanced as you want to, and then it gets pretty lofty.
Yeah. I know that's one of the, well, as you said, they are democratizing this ability to, make such a huge impact, create a lot of value out of sort of data as your raw commodity, or your raw asset. So yeah, I couldn't agree more. And that's why I think they are having, that's why they are growing so fast, and why they are having such an impact. How so maybe break down a little bit how you built your workflows in Alteryx, and then so how did you distribute it? How did you effectively showcase to the right stakeholders what you had done to impact their decision making, to generate that value within the organization?
Good question. So a lot of it was behind the scenes. So there wasn't too much stakeholder engagement on that side because we were just doing our own jobs, right? And that's all they needed. However, the premier workflow that I mentioned earlier around inventory stratification, that one was easy to publicize. So specifically to Ingersoll Rand, they have standing whiteboards all over the distribution center and their offices. It's the same way. And that's how you report your KPIs. So they have daily, weekly cadences where the teams will huddle around the whiteboard, review their metrics, look for the red, talk about it, so on and so forth. So inventory had its own board. And so there were certain things that we were tracking, and we had a whole bunch of Excel printouts, right? It's so crazy to talk about printing data to me, but this is the process. So when it came to inventory, when we had this stratification, we could print 4 different views one per business unit, and then leaders could walk up to the board and see everything they needed to in one snap. And then that would be my platform to brag about what the team had done with our learning logins and how this was our first workflow and how we were so excited about it, and how it only took like less than 2 minutes to run this, and it stratified every item. Like I would get all soapboxy about it on any time I had the chance. And then eventually when we were promoted, and so I should also say that I had a very strong ally through all of this. So my manager was a very strong advocate for analytics and BI. He was also pretty savvy. So he knew what he was betting on with us. So when he promoted all of us and we brought in Tableau, that's where things started to get really public, I would say. So we had, I won't talk about all of our builds, but some of the cooler ones were, we had a display that was on a giant TV screen above the picking cell. And for those that aren't familiar with distribution, pickers literally go pick product off the shelves, and then it will get packed and validated and shipped and things like that. So we had one over the picking cell that it was a Tableau dashboard, and each person's little icon was a tiny little fork truck, and it would scoot along the screen, and it would change colors based on how they were performing to target. And so what we saw when we stood that up, one, we ended up changing the metric through that process because we wanted to, I won't go too deep, but we wanted to normalize. So if you pick screws out of a box versus giant compressors off a shelf, like that time is going to be different, right? So we normalized it, and so we changed their metric and then gamified it so they could see where their fork trucks were on the screen. So when the pickers came to drop off their load, they'd always check, and then this friendly competition ensued. Their rates went up, and it was just fun for the whole shop, for that matter. We had another one that was on a tablet, and the operator could see on the screen, this order is stuck in whatever status. And it would help him find the actual box on the floor that needed to ship today, or it would be late, and he could see where it was stuck, do whatever transaction, and then in about 15 minutes, the screen would update and it would, progress the pack through the ordering flow. So those are both, one's highly visible, one's a little more behind the scenes, but both were readily accepted. And then I'll just give you one more example. In the materials team, anybody who's been around a purchasing or a materials team knows that they have a ton of metrics that and by ton, I mean, I think in this example, there were 18 different metrics that they're responsible for in their daily jobs. So the switching costs from one metric and one report to the other, I mean, it was killing the team. They couldn't focus on one thing without having to chase down something else. So one of our biggest Tableau builds consolidates most of those reports into one dashboard, does some prorating so people can see like what things are bubbling to the top based on all of the metrics. And so I'll just say that the one in the materials department was very visible. It also had a screen above the area, so sometimes we would show certain things, but the team itself was able to go into one workbook and do their roles. And whenever they needed to jump to something tactical like an Excel sheet or a SharePoint site, there's a hot link that would take them to it. So that one completely revolutionized that area as well and helped them not die from switching costs.
Yeah. Well, what I really love about these examples and the stories here are that, and this is just great takeaways for others, that it really started with one prototype, right? Like this initial prototyping really built the buzz, and then all of a sudden you've got these four, I'm sure you've got more examples, but you've just spoken of four great examples of where the analytics initiatives have really started to pay off in a very commercial way. And it all just started small, right? And you don't, because I think you can get paralyzed by how big the opportunity is, how much there is to do, right? And it's sometimes all about just breaking it down into, one thing first, getting that nailed, and then moving on to the next thing, and then you're getting more engagement, and then that just balloons, and you get this much wider buy-in from everyone else. So I really like to hear how things have evolved quite quickly by the sounds of it as well.
That's you're spot on. That's powerful. I coach my team and anybody who will listen that we don't need to go from okay to great. We need to go from okay to good, and then from good to better, and better to great, and so on. So I view all of life as iterative. So we did a thing, we learned a thing. We did a thing, we learned a thing. And to that point, we also brought in Agile in the last year. So on that team, as we were standing out these dashboards for the first time, we were also bringing in Agile for the first time. And it too was iterative. We started old school. I had a coach who was walking us through this progression, but we started with index cards on a whiteboard with a magnetic clip. And then it evolved, and we were fully online doing 2-week sprints and having retrospectives and turning our cards into story points and all kinds of things. And I say that because doing Agile let us, one, partner with our customers more, but two, it let us give iterative releases. So we could meet with them each week, whatever that cadence needed to be, and say, here's what we're building. Are we on the right track? And we could get their feedback and evolve it as we were going, instead of guessing toward the end and thinking we made great and we completely missed the boat.
The next thing I just want to dive into and get your perspective on is it's really like a huge trend that I believe is happening out there, and I kind of get the feeling that you've seen it as well. So that's why I want to get your view. Is that we're moving into this world, this paradigm where there's we've got this more, we're going to be more immersed, this immersion in data, this immersion in insights, and why I kind of see it from the stories that you've gone into is that the you were putting all the key metrics on a board every day. You were putting a dashboard in front of the pickers. You were putting a dashboard in the hands of someone on a tablet walking around the warehouse. There's just this more immersion. Historically, you might get a printout or you might get something in your email, but you're just so much more immersed in it. And so I wanted to see what you think about that, and if you see that too.
Yes, I do. I think analytics is here to stay. It's not going anywhere. It's in your face. I mean, just look at COVID, right? Data is how we're talking about numbers and risks and trends and populations and you name it. I think where people need to lean in is if you're the one building, I mentioned a trail of bodies earlier. I think if you're the one building things, don't have a trail of bodies behind you. Focus on change management. Take the time to explain the why and bring your customer with you. If in these examples I've given, if all we had to do was build something and release it into the wild, I'd have 100 things to talk through. But I gave you like 3 or 4 because we were changing the way people do work. We were improving and increasing their data literacy. I think people take for granted as a builder that they're data literate, so they assume everybody else is, and that's not true. And then as somebody who's receiving these things, so not the builder, but the ingester, the consumer, give yourself the space to fail. So there's an acronym I really quite like. I learned it at Ingersoll Rand. FAIL is first attempt in learning. So give yourself the space to be data illiterate and to ask the questions that you think are silly. They're not. An analyst is going to love answering them for you. The people with that mentality thrive off helping others and answering questions. So you're not going to look dumb. They're going to be excited that you're trying. So I would say as a consumer, try to leave some space for yourself to learn this new world that we're all trying to figure out together.
Do you have any tips for teams and organizations trying to lift the data literacy of everyone?
Good question. I do not have a silver bullet. I think it comes down to partnering on the ground level, but you also need a leader at the top driving a strategy, and then in the middle is where the answer is. So in my old world where we were working with operators and our customers and building things alongside of them and answering their questions and setting up trainings and all of that groundwork change management, you can't skip that. I don't know how you would possibly fast track that without burning people in the process. But at the same time, you need somebody at the top driving a strategy, sponsoring things. BI is not cheap. It's cheaper than global ERP systems, which I think is why BI is so popular. Instead of trying to roll out one system that's integrated globally with all things, you put BI as the hub in the middle and it connects to all the spokes, right? It's more nimble, more affordable, more scalable. So those are my thoughts. You definitely need somebody at the top that's driving I like to call it the Polaris, like what's the North Star that we're all working toward? Are we all in the same canoe?
Yeah, no, look, I really agree with that. And it's you definitely get this. When I was working in some large organizations, a lot of the executive level themselves aren't totally data literate. So you do have to do some convincing there. Because they haven't really, in a lot of cases, because they're older, they haven't really lived in this world of these tools and what's possible, etc. So there's almost some selling and marketing that you've got to do internally to showcase the value. Usually, what I've found historically, and it'd be interesting to see if you found this as well. If you can put a fancy dashboard in front of someone that enables them to really drill down into some insight that they've never seen before, that usually is a wow moment and gets a lot of buy-in then and there.
Agreed, with one caveat. It has to be something that doesn't surprise them too much, because part of what you're solving for is trust. So at the high level, they're on the hook if something goes wrong. and you're feeding them this new thing, and they can't see behind the scenes anymore. It's not an Excel sheet with formulas they can see. So yes, there is a lot to be gained when they have that first aha moment, but you don't want it too shocking to where they want to poke holes in it and don't trust what you're showing them.
Yeah, that's a good one, because you also don't want to show them something that isn't positive. That's another the one that can catch you out. You usually start with some sort of positive insight that showcases how much you're going to increase profitability or something like that.
Something rosy, yes, something safe, something that's more of like a proof of concept. See, this is what we could do.
Yeah, exactly.
And I don't mean that to insult the higher ups. If I were in their shoes, I'd feel the same way. We in a past role, they tried to roll out this. I don't want to get too detailed, but they tried to roll something out I didn't agree with because I didn't understand how it worked, and I became the one that they had to sell. And by sell, I mean make me understand. Like, I refused to sign off on a black box. I'm not putting my name on something I don't understand. And these leaders feel the same way. They want to know how it's made, and they want to know that they can trust it. And they might be on the hook to articulate it too, which I imagine would be quite terrifying if you weren't in the room building these things and now you have to explain where it came from. So I see why they'd be a little hesitant.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's really, really good insight. Well, why don't we just dive just to round off the episode, because I mean there's been some great stuff we've talked about. So I've been loving hearing your perspective on many things. So you've moved to a new organization, and I presume you're dealing with a different scenario, but you're trying to implement a lot of the expertise into this new area. So do you maybe want to just touch on that a little bit and maybe some of the interesting high-level things that you're doing there?
Absolutely. So I'll tell you, I wasn't looking to leave. I know people say that, and that's what happened to me. I was scooped up because this job was too good to be true. It's exactly what I wanted to do, and that's because that thing I articulated a second ago around you need grassroots and you need leadership, that's what JLL is doing. They have a global business intelligence center of excellence, so a BICOE, that works with all of the accounts to stand things up that are, best practices, standardization, knowledge sharing, talent sharing. So the way JLL works is different companies will hire them to do their corporate real estate items, which could be purchasing land, helping with their leasing agreements, facilities management, everything from construction to huge mega sales and everything in between. And I've just lost my train of thought.
That's all right.
Ask me the question again.
You were talking about how you're working with customers.
It's back now. So JLL has all of these accounts, which can feel very isolated and siloed. So this new COE is meant to be that glue and create cohesion. So you could have one account that's making dashboards that solve for these questions this particular client is asking. And you could have another team doing the same exact thing unbeknownst to each other. So JLL is getting pretty smart, and they're trying to put all that together. Obviously not sharing information from client to client, but more sanitized dashboards. Here's the overall metric they're trying to solve for. Here's what it looks like. Here's our color palette. And then I was referencing talent when I lost my train of thought. So the COE is also making it so that between accounts, if people want to grow their career or go learn a different service line, they can. They don't have to leave the company. So it's solving for a lot of the problems I was quickly seeing in my old roles around analytics and BI and setting this grand strategy. So far from what I've seen, JLL is doing it correctly.
That's great. Yeah, you mentioned a couple of things there that's quite interesting. One is, I think, and this is probably similar to many organizations, there's a lot of duplicate effort because of these sort of silos that everyone's been in, and that is a function of a few things, I think. And one of those being just, the tools just weren't there. The tool set wasn't there. The suite of tools wasn't available. But I think the other thing that I really like as well is that, the organization, it sounds like the JLL has recognized that having some sort of central authority, some sort of central governance around this really impactful strategy around analytics is the way to go. And so is this a recent phenomenon, do you think, or have they had this in the works for years?
It's new. So the person I backfilled used to report into the account, and now I report into the COE. So I dotted line into the account. I'm still responsible for standing up BI on our account, but I solid line into the COE, which I think, based on what I've seen, is the next brilliant move to make. We reserve the right to be smarter a couple of years from now than we are today, but I think this is the best strategy to test out for now, is to create that cohesion.
Great. And with the COE, do you feel like that they are they're going to be the coordinators of a lot of these initiatives that we've discussed in today's call, like creating events, probably virtual events right now. Also, finding ways to get everyone more data literate. Is that going to be getting the communication and the requirements from all areas of the business, sort of centralized in one location? Is that do you sort of see the same things happening at JLL with this current setup?
Yeah, I see that as a large role of the COE, but there's also just acting as conduits, I guess, funneling information from one place to another. So, for example, I'm new, so I'll go out to the COE and say, hey, what are you guys using for data dictionaries? What are you using for wireframing and blah, blah, blah. And we can talk shop and figure out what works. So yeah, I definitely see that being extremely helpful.
Cool. Interesting. You mentioned data dictionaries and wireframing. What are there some tools that you're using already on those? Because I think that's quite a unique, sort of a niche area of setting up or planning out your dashboards or your reports, etc.
Yeah, I think having a robust data dictionary with full schema and lineage is like the grand dream, and we're not there. We have something. It's better than nothing. It needs to be evolved, and I think so. In a perfect world, you would use the data dictionary before, during, and after a build, and that's not how we're using it today, and that's where I see us getting to. In terms of wireframing, that's not what we're using. That's why I'm asking the COE, what are you using? Because we need it, because it's, especially working remote right now. I mean, a whiteboard is one thing, but it's not the full extent of a semi-functional wireframe where you can put that in front of the customer and say, here's what I heard. And even if you completely nail it, and this is exactly what the customer said, the customer is going to now want something new because they have a new aha from this thing that they built. That's the beauty of Agile. You allow the customer to change a little bit. You don't want too much scope creep, but so that's what we're looking at bringing on. There's a few that we're looking at, but I'm too green in any of them to vouch for which one we're going after.
Right. Sounds good. Okay. Well, we've gone for sort of a lot of time. I mean, we could talk for much longer. I feel. I mean, there's so many interesting things that we've discussed today. One thing I think would be good to round things off with a sort of final question. Where is there any sort of unique insights you have of where things are going in this space? How different do you think that a COE will look, or analytics initiatives will look in maybe 2, 3, 5 years time? Things are happening so fast, as we've discussed. So, it'd be interesting to see where you think things might be going.
Good question. They're definitely going in the predictive space. So there's a race to see who can peek around the corners first. And then to that tune, there's a race to see who can stand up software that lets citizen data scientists stand up models. I have played with a few different ones. I don't want to speak to any of them because Again, I'm too green to say which I preferred and why, but it's the only thing I can say is that it's not as simple as it sounds. So making your first workflow is one thing. Making your first predictive model that you'd put your own paycheck on is something else. But that's definitely a large trend, is figuring out how to start to predict the future. And then using AI. So there's this fun thing we're playing with. It's called iQuant. And it is an AI reader that you can pull a dashboard through, and it will mimic human eye movement and tell you where your dashboard is too cluttered, where it's clear, and so on and so forth. And it's really neat. So I think
that's cool.
I know it's turning into this meta thing where BI is being used on BI. So we're like self-improving this ecosystem. And I mentioned earlier, I see BI as being the hub for large, costly software rollouts. So instead of having a global platform that by the time you've plugged it all together, half of it's expired, half of it doesn't work, and parts of it aren't flexible enough. Like that's what we've seen traditionally. I think BI can be that space in between that is nimble, and you can stay on whatever software you're using for purchasing or whatever. Logistics, doesn't matter. But you also have the human in the middle that's putting it all together. I think it's going to be interesting to see what the war on talent becomes, because on one side, the need and desire for BI is growing very, very quickly. But on the other side, embracing terms like citizen data scientists are pulling people like me out of the woodwork, that we didn't know this was our passion. I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up until I heard that word. And then I was like, oh, now I know. So it's going to be interesting to see what surfaces as people find their calling, and as platforms help with the democratization of this journey. Yeah.
No, those are all great insights. I think the war on talent is a great one, and I think you're right. You just think about how sometimes I read there's maybe 200 million Excel users or something like that. So many of those Excel users, historic Excel users or similar tools, they've got the ability, they've got the usually the intellectual curiosity to evolve and learn one of these other tools. I think so. I think that there's a lot of hidden data scientists out there that just don't know it yet. They just don't know what's possible. So I think that's quite exciting. One of the other things that I think I'll add to what you said is I feel like and it sort of goes it goes alongside what you mentioned. I think one of the big things we'll see is that there'll be a lot of automation in the tools themselves to actually run the analysis. So it won't be as it's a lot of it is automated now in all the tools, Power BI, Tableau, etc. But I think it's going to be even more so. Like it'll be a even more low touch. Like a lot of the maybe analytical patterns or like type of insights. There could just be a lot more automation. Like you just literally plug in the data into sort of like a template, and then it just sort of creates the dashboard for you. Maybe using iQuant instead of evaluating what you've done, maybe it just does it for you. So I think that's quite exciting. But I also think one of the big trends is sort of, they call it this no code movement. And I think where software and even dashboards were historically expensive and hard to create, it's just becoming so easy to create apps. It's becoming so easy to create dashboards. I think that's just going to continue more and more. So maybe that we're basically saying the same thing, right? Just using some different terminology.
Yeah, it's going to be fun to watch how it unfolds. I mean, when I went to college, if data science had been a path, I don't even know if I would have done it, because I didn't even know what data science was, but I don't even think it existed. And that's why I went through the finance and supply chain route. And I just think we're all getting smarter every day. And so colleges are getting smarter, and platforms and certifications and networking and all that. It's going to be fun to see how it continues to evolve. It's going to happen quickly, and it's going to keep happening quickly.
Yeah. Yeah, I think staying current, staying on top of things, is going to be a strong attribute of any employee, or anyone who wants to stay relevant, really, isn't it? I think that's going to be a must going forward, just with the speed in which things are changing. But one of the other things that, very last point, I think, all of the world of opportunity, the world of optimizations, the predictions that you can do within organizations, that world has grown exponentially as well. And so we're still only starting to see, I feel, what can be done, the value that can be generated from these new tools. So there's still just this ginormous opportunity out there for anyone who wants to get into this area, who wants to make a difference within their team or within the organization. I mean, it is huge. It's just we're 5 to 10% of what's possible.
Oh yeah, and it's at face value, it's very intimidating. So for those on the outside that are curious but haven't dipped a toe into seeing if you're a potential citizen data scientist, it's very intimidating. But I promise it's not that bad. It's not. This community, when I went to that summit, I felt like I had found my people. Like the energy in the room was just like my vibe. Like I found my herd, The type of personalities that you'll work with in this career, just they have a passion for knowledge, and they like being a geek, and they'll try to out nerd you. And it's just a fun space to be in, because everybody's trying to make the world a better place in their own way, either through automation or through training or through dashboarding, you name it. So it's a very rewarding career, and it has tangible deliverables. So when you build something and you surface it, I mean, it impacts people's lives, and it's a very rewarding career. I like it.
Yeah. I just love that summit idea. It's actually given me ideas for what we do. I think maybe there's, not all organizations have the resources and the ability to put these things on, and there's so much value in it. Maybe there's a plug-in solution for this thing, to build up a summit and engagement with an organization. So it's a super idea. I love it. Well, why don't we round things off there, Jamie? This has been awesome. Really great discussion, and have really enjoyed learning a bit more about your background and what you've done and where you've come from. And it's great to see, that you're making a huge impact in this space and in the areas that you've been working in.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Cool. Okay, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. It's been great to have you on this particular episode. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast channel on whatever app you like to listen to things on. Lots of great episodes coming out. Lots of really interesting people like Jamie coming on to the podcast. So really keen to get those into your ears as soon as they're released. Okay, everyone. Thanks again. Take care.